I mean, I think the whole of the West should absolutely be suing China. I think we should cut them off. I want my civil liberties back.
Yeah.
I was born with those civil liberties.
Yeah.
My family, you were, everyone watching this, we were born with those liberties. We've just allowed the government to take them away. It was an emergency measure almost a year ago.
Yeah.
When are we going to accept we are no longer in an emergency?
Earlier today, when the Transport Secretary Grant Shapps appeared on Julia Hartley-Brewer's talk radio show, this happened.
When we last spoke on the 8th of January, 2 months ago, just days after we went into lockdown, here's what we had to say to each other. And at the point when we have got the over 70s vaccinated, we're told by mid-February, at that point, 2 weeks after that, 3 weeks after that, I want every single one of my freedoms back, and I want every business back open, I want every child back at school, and you can't promise me that.
Well, you and I will be joining each other on the barricades to get our freedoms back.
Will you promise that?
Yes, Julia.
Grant Shapps, you promised you'd be on the barricades 2 months ago if we didn't get all of our freedoms back as soon as over 70s have been vaccinated. What time should I meet you at the barricades?
Well, look, we're starting to get our freedoms back. My kids
that wasn't the conversation.
Well, hold on.
I wanted all of my freedoms back, and you agreed.
Well, that was definitely something. Thank you for joining me, Julia. I'm going to put the longer version of the clip in the pinned comment on the video. But what happened? Explain.
Well, I have to say, Transport Secretary Grant Shapps, I was quite surprised to see him back on the show this morning, to be honest with you. Yeah, as I said in that clip, 2 months ago, we spoke about the lockdown. It had just started that week. Boris Johnson had said when he announced it, we'll, as long as we don't see hospitals overwhelmed, the rollout of the vaccine. Loads of people who were not in favour of another lockdown, people who opposed the one in November, including a lot of Tory backbench MPs, said, no, fair enough, vaccine rollout. This is a game changer. It makes a difference. As long as we've got the vaccine rolled out, then we'll start coming out of lockdown. Grant Shapps, he was categorical. There's no question at all. He agreed with me. Once the first jab had been given by mid-February to all of the over 70s, we ended up beating that target in this country by a few days. And then 3 weeks for it to work, 8th of March, that's it. We were going to be out. And start all of that relaxation, darn quickly, and we were going to get our rights back. Well, look, we're looking at, another few months till June the 21st, when we might, at the earliest possible point, if Sage, if Chris Whitty, if Sir Patrick Vallance, if everyone else in government agrees, Boris Johnson will allow us to have our fundamental freedoms back. I'm sorry, it's not good enough. He promised me he'd be on the barricades. I've spoken to so many cabinet ministers behind the scenes who said that was what they expected as well. It's not happening. And I don't know why. I do not know why it's not happening, because we're following data, not dates. We should be free by now.
I mean, that's the thing. You mentioned that the goalposts keep moving. And I think at this point, this is no longer about, being pro or against lockdown. The debate that you've been having recently is primarily about scrutinizing the government. And it's primarily about the fact that, these empty promises that they've been making. I mean, we're not really just saying that, we should have just had the freedoms now. I mean, ideally, we should have. The idea is that why would you promise something that you knew you couldn't deliver?
Well, they could deliver. Let's remember, it is a political decision to go to lockdown. It's a political decision to ease lockdown, which is why Nicola Sturgeon has decided, probably simply because Boris Johnson's not doing it, to ease lockdown sooner. On Friday in Scotland, 4 people are allowed to meet from 2 different households indoors. Wow, we're going to have to wait another 2 months for that in England for 6 people from 2 households. I mean, the exciting thing that happened this week, of course, was not just schools that are going back and children actually going to get proper education. They have by the way, a legal right to. I'm allowed to go and sit on a bench at the end of my road with my husband or my daughter. No one else, not anyone from any other household, but with someone I already live with. I mean, I'd rather sit with him on the sofa in my own house, thank you very much. It is absolutely astonishing when almost 99% in some cases of people over 80 and over 70 have been vaccinated. I'm 52 years old. I'm getting my vaccine this Friday, for goodness sake. I'm as much as my daughter might like to think, I'm not old. I've got no underlying health complaints. I'm not obese, and I've had COVID already a year ago. In fact, I got it a year ago this week, and yet, even with that rollout, even with all that success, even with the vaccines, both Pfizer and AstraZeneca actually proving to be more effective, not as effective, more effective than the trials suggested, they, from one jab, not just two, one jab, they are still not letting us out of lockdown. And we've got Chris Whitty and Patrick Vallance saying, oh, well, there could be a surge. Yes, that's what happens after lockdowns. If you suppress a virus will go up again. We know that. We are going to have to stay in lockdown forever if we want to constantly keep a low rate of lockdown of COVID. I just think it's untenable. I don't think it's about government making promises they can't keep. I think it's about governments lying to us, and it's as simple as.
Yeah, I mean that the one thing is about the government scrutiny and also how competent they are. And you also mentioned during the interview test and trace, and the waste of the taxpayers' money. And Grant Shapps couldn't actually answer the fact that it has not really worked properly, and that's one issue. I mean, second issue is that the role of the media. Apart from certain a few radio shows like yourselves, who actually kind of focus on the real issues, as well as, of course, like Test and Trace. Grant Shapps was doing the media round this morning, a lot of TV shows, and they were, of course, focusing on Test and Trace. But I didn't see any of them ask the questions that you were asking, like about civil liberties.
They never do. Even when you see those press conferences at Number 10 or whenever you see the interviews in the morning media round, and we get most of the ministers most of the time. Some refuse to come on. Sometimes I think the people are a bit difficult about that because they don't want to be asked questions by me. But they're entitled to do that, of course. It's a free country. But invariably the questions are, why didn't you lock down sooner? Why don't you lock down harder? Why on earth are you releasing lockdown? Why are you letting children go back to school? We're all going to die. They never hold the government to account on the actual promises they've made. Boris Johnson said on January the 4th. God, I remember it so vividly. I just got back from holiday, just delighted to get my daughter back at school, and there we were suddenly plunged into another lockdown. Boris Johnson said we just want to make sure that hospitals aren't overwhelmed. Well, they weren't, and they won't be now. He wanted to see cases going down. Well, they are. Hospital admissions going down, deaths going down, and the rollout of the vaccine. Well, we fulfilled every single one of those. Why don't we have our freedoms back? What's really telling, I think, later in the interview, Grant Shapps says, look, I know you want to go on your holidays. I know you want that. And I have to say, I got rather more angry than I meant to. But my God, if you're not angry now, what's wrong with you people?
Yeah.
I said, I don't just want to go on holiday. I want my civil liberties back.
Yeah.
I was born with those civil liberties.
Yeah.
My family, everyone watching this, we were born with those liberties. They weren't given to us by a government. They were hard won. They were fought for. They were died for by our predecessors. They were died for in the Second World War yet again to make sure we still had them. And yet we've just allowed the government to take them away. It was an emergency measure almost a year ago.
Yeah.
When are we going to accept we are no longer in an emergency? When are we going to accept that just because you're scared of leaving the house and worried about a virus, even if you are at a low risk of dying of the virus, as most people under 70 without health complaints are, no reason why you get to curtail my freedoms or anyone else's freedom to go to work, to run a business, to see their family, to go to school or do anything else, protest in the streets and speak freely indeed. I think we are genuinely in a crisis situation in this country, and it's got very little to do with people dying of COVID. It's got an awful lot to do with the slaying, the killing off, possibly permanently, of our fundamental relationship between citizens and state, our freedom of movement and our freedom of speech and our fundamental civil rights. And I am genuinely scared we will never get them back.
No, it's a good point. And I think the one issue is what's going to happen after all this and how governments and media reacted. We have a couple of questions from the members of the channel on this, actually. Natalia says, Maya, could you ask Julia if she thinks there will be an investigation on handling the lockdown, including the allocation of contracts and reducing people's rights and policing and education, and also will there be an opportunity to recover some of the cost from China?
Oh God! I mean, I think the whole of the West should absolutely be suing China. I think we should cut them off. I don't care how much you want to put up the cost of any goods because they're no longer made in cheap old China. I think we should absolutely cut them off. I think it's absolutely outrageous. yes, Donald Trump was right on one thing. Yes, it is the China virus. That's exactly what it is. But look, there's definitely going to be an inquiry, no doubt about that. I think an awful lot of what the government's doing now, what Sage is doing, Witty and Valance, is actually all about preparing for the next for the inquiry on this sort of, well, look, we did all we could. We had the precautionary principle. Of course, you and I both know that actually being cautious now means actually taking terrible risks for the future of our health, of our economy and our people, health mentally and physically, and with our civil liberties. So it's not cautious at all, it's the opposite of it.
Yep.
But, oh, God, we're going to make damn sure there is an inquiry. But what I don't want it to be is about how much money was spent on PPE contracts for Matt Hancock's mates. That's an issue, I realise, but it is a tiny issue compared to the idea that the state can decide, based on cautious scientists and medics, to take away people's civil liberties rather than let them make decisions themselves. We have given away those rights once. If we don't insist on getting them back and insisting we have a constitution that stops that from ever happening again, we may as well stop pretending we live in a free and democratic liberal democracy.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the role of the media is very important, and how they're going to actually report on this investigation, and also how proper these inquiries are going to be. The media have shown recently what they actually want to focus on, their priorities, whether it's the negative sides of what's happening right now, not kind of reporting on the positive stories, or focusing on the impacts of lockdown on ordinary people. But also recently with everything else that happened. So actually we have a question which you're going to love, actually. Miles says, will the UK abolish the monarchy? Now this relates to what happened with Meghan Markle's interview, and also what happened to Piers Morgan and leaving Good Morning Britain. Because in my view, this is just another version of cancel culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the short answer is no, the UK isn't going to abolish the monarchy. I think in lots of ways this will actually strengthen the monarchy in terms of the Queen's response from Buckingham Palace yesterday. I'm very unhappy about Piers Morgan leaving G&B. Now, look, it may well be that, he was happy to leave, he wanted to leave, he's got another job, and he was just in a bad mood. And, he's big enough and old enough and ugly enough to look after himself, and he's got enough wonga in the bank to cope. But this is a part of cancel culture where a presenter who's hired to give their opinion, that's literally his job. He's not a newsreader. If they have a newsreader, he gives his opinion. And if he gave his opinion, honestly held opinion about Meghan, saying he thought that he just didn't believe a word that she was saying, he's entitled to that opinion. And judging by the polling on that interview Meghan and Harry gave to Oprah Winfrey, and indeed what the Queen said in terms of recollections may vary, it would suggest to me an awful lot of people don't believe at least some of what Meghan had to say. And certainly there are certain things that she did have to say which are demonstrably, provably untrue. They are not factual accounts of what happened, like getting married 3 days earlier, Archie's title being decided, and security for the family, and other issues as well. But the key thing here is she spoke her truth, as she likes to call it, and Oprah calls it. Well, Piers Morgan spoke his truth. If you give a public interview on an international basis like that, people are entitled to comment on what you have said publicly, and he gave a comment. But this is the thing. It doesn't matter whether it's one complaint or 41,000. It was an orchestrated Twitter mob pile-on. Now, Piers Morgan normally loves that sort of stuff, but he also had an attack from the weather guy, Alex Beresford, on his show. Now, whether or not it's appropriate for a junior member of the team to be talking to the star like that, I mean, frankly, I'm not quite sure why Piers Morgan, who's made G&B what it is, the success it is, should have to put up with that. He wasn't happy, he walked out. But the question is, should ITV have the right to ask Piers Morgan to apologise to a public figure like Meghan for saying he doesn't believe what she says? No, I don't think they do. And the idea that you can't go back on air unless you do apologise, which appears to be what the message has been, is, well, we're in thought police territory, aren't we? Please go on air and say something that you do not believe to be true about someone who you like or dislike, whatever. That's Big Brother territory. It's Soviet Union territory. It's we are talking about show trial territory here. I don't agree with Piers Morgan on lots of things. I think he's had an appalling stance on lockdown. I think he's an appalling hypocrite for telling everyone to lock down and make the sacrifice over Christmas and then getting on a plane to Antigua. I went to Antigua, but I wasn't telling everyone else to lock down at the
Yeah.
same time.
Consistent.
Exactly. He's a hypocrite. So I can disagree with him. I don't even have to agree with what he said about Meghan.
Yep.
But that's irrelevant. I still defend his right to think it and to say it and to not apologise for it.
I mean, that's the thing. There's a double standard when it comes to the woke side and the cancel culture, because when Meghan Markle expresses her opinion and makes claims against the royal family, that's fine. You have to believe her. Whereas when Piers Morgan expresses his opinion and makes claims against Meghan Markle, the world is going to end. And this is the whole problem. But on the plus side, there's some good news. With GMB basically going down, viewers can now tune into Julia Hartley-Brewer's show on Talk Radio in the morning.
but this is the thing. We are all on video. You know, virtually every interview is on video, and we've got cameras on, and it is like a TV studio. And genuinely, it's probably a good thing for me professionally for Piers Morgan not to be on air, because if you want to watch the BBC snooze fest, that's choice. But if you don't want that, then I may well benefit from Piers Morgan being off air. I still think he should be on GMB.
Yes, to be fair, the BBC Breakfast team were celebrating. I don't think anyone's going to tune into that, so good luck, guys.
They might tune in, but you can only last about 3 minutes before you fall asleep again.
Exactly.
News fest.
Yeah, no, it is what it is. Thanks again for coming on the show, and best of luck with your breakfast show. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed for inviting me.